My name is Leora Vale, 33 years old. I'm standing in the bright, hushed stillness of my Boston Harbor condo when the message drops into our family thread with the soft, merciless ping of a timer hitting 0. This year, it's just Melissa's family. Hope you understand. The November light pours through floor-to-ceiling windows and throws little shards of gold across the crystal vase I bought last week because I liked how it caught the morning. Everything in here is spare, tasteful, a kind of curated calm, soft whites, matte gray, clean lines, uncluttered surfaces. Nothing in this room betrays the hollow spreading in my chest. My thumb hovers over the phone as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less sharp. They don't. A dozen replies sprint through my head and dissolve. Jokes, a hurt emoji, a long paragraph about fairness, a single furious why. I choose the smallest word in the English language and try to make it sound like grace. Enjoy. The letters sit there, cool and final. I set the phone on the marble and place both palms flat, like I need to steady the counter or the counter needs to steady me. The reflection in the polished stone throws back a woman who looks composed, successful, unfazed. Only my hands give me away, a tremor like a moth caught behind glass. Yesterday, I was elbow deep in holiday errands, personalized stockings for the nieces and nephews, a cashmere throw for Grandma Margaret, a bottle of single malt for Uncle Robert, even a sleek cheese board for my parents, for show, if not for use. When Grandma called last week, her voice warmed the edges of my day. You're still coming for Thanksgiving at your parents', right? I can't wait to see you, sweetheart. Wouldn't miss it, I'd said, stirring the cranberry chutney I was perfecting from her recipe. 3 test batches later, I had it dialed. Tart edging into sweet, just enough spice to feel like memory. Now, staring at the 3 sentences that reassign me to the margins yet again, I feel the outline of a decision press against my ribs. The phone rings. Cousin Derek's name cuts across the screen like a rope thrown to a drowning swimmer. Lyora? You see the message? His voice carries the stunned laugh of someone who can't believe the floor disappeared. I saw. It's not just you, he says, voice tightening. They've cut nearly everyone. 18 people, Lee. Melissa's crew only. I press my forehead to the window. Sailboats pinprick the water. A gull hangs like a comma against the sky. Why would they do that? Aunt Linda says keeping it small, he says, and the way he spits the phrase tells me what he thinks of it, more like keeping it curated. It isn't just about this year. It's 1,000 tiny edits to my existence, practical gifts, while Melissa's were extravagant, schedule miracles for her games, while my science fair sat in a quiet gym, apologies for missing and excuses for missing, and later, silence. The pattern got so familiar, I forgot to flinch. You there? Derek asks. Yeah, I say. I'm here. He exhales. We're thinking Grandma's, but the house is too small. She's already fussing that the folding chairs wobble. I can almost see the cramped living room, the old lace curtains, the too low heat tick-tick-ticking in the radiator. I picture all of us stacked like Tetris into corners, making polite jokes to cover the bruise. I look at my condo, its pristine surfaces and the harbor stretching glittering and cold beyond it, and I don't see calm anymore. I see a stage. Something steadies inside me, a spine rising to meet its own height. The light on the water flares so bright I blink. When my eyes clear, my reflection in the glass has changed. Chin lifted, shoulders squared. The hurt is still there, but now it sits next to something older and harder, resolve. I scroll to a number I've kept for special things and not used nearly enough. Chef Martin, it's Leora Vale. A beat. Then the warm, alert baritone of a man who has orchestrated kitchens and storms. Ms. Vale, how may I help? I'd like to host Thanksgiving for 32 at my New Hampshire place. I can hear the quick mental math over the line, the calendar, the staff, the roads. That's ambitious on short notice, Simone, he says, not unkindly. I'm aware. My gaze flicks to the family thread. 3 dots pulsing and dying without saying anything at all. It's time for a new tradition, one where everyone actually has a place. He doesn't ask why my voice is too calm. We'll make it beautiful, he says, Send me your family staples. I'll elevate without erasing. I hang up and let the quiet pour back in. The question shivers up anyway. Am I doing this out of love or revenge? Maybe both, and maybe that's honest. The marble is cool under my fingertips, and somewhere under the cool I feel the thrum of something electric, a storm gathering far out to sea. A voicemail banner slides across the top of my screen. From Dad. I don't press play. I can already hear the tone. Measured, reasonable, the voice he saves for clients and complicated conversations. The one that makes you question whether the thing that just hurt you should have hurt at all. He's good at that. He always has been. My phone pings again. Derek, a stream of texts. Grandma says she'll go wherever you are. A heart emoji. Rachel and Tom are in. Robert and Sarah too. Then, also, hearing your parents are calling around telling folks you're making a spectacle. Of course they are. I slide open the Notes app and start a list like I do for product launches. Seating, for 32. Allergies, Rachel, tree nuts. Elders/heat blankets. Kids Corner, Emma, Unicorn Phase. Transport for Aunt Elaine, 2 hips, 1 cane. Backup generator check, candles. My lists calm me, but they also sharpen me. It's how I've survived rooms that didn't think I belonged. Write the plan, execute the plan, deliver beyond the plan. Out of habit, my mind touches the old file cabinet in my head, the one labeled evidence. There's a small, strange comfort in knowing I'm not crazy. I've kept a paper trail for years, not because I planned to use it, but because some part of me needed proof. The condo air changes like the pressure before rain. I'm suddenly remembering my MIT acceptance letter, smoothed flat after I crumpled it. The way my father said, "Computer science? For a girl?" And then returned to his paper, my mother's gentle, empty, "We just worry about you, honey." I'm remembering the 3 jobs I stacked to pay for what they wouldn't co-sign, and how 6 months later the house got refinanced for Melissa's wedding with a shrug and a worth every penny. I push the memories down where they live now, not as open wounds, but mapped scars. The phone rings again, and this time it's Grandma. "I just heard," she says without even saying hello, and her breath crackles with outrage. "Linda told me small Thanksgiving." What she meant was exclusive. I find myself smiling at the window. "I'm hosting, Gran, New Hampshire." "The house you bought and they've never visited?" Her voice softens at the edges. "Good. I'll be there with bells on. And I'll tell the others to wear boots if that storm does what they say." "What storm?" "News says weather's turning by Thursday. You check your generator." This is love in our family. Recipes, warnings, and the unvarnished truth. "Thanks, Gran." "Leora," she adds, the tone that means she's putting a hand on my cheek even over the line. "It wasn't your imagination. Not any of it." After we hang up, I open social media, despite promising myself not to. Melissa's latest post sits like a postcard from a universe where I don't exist. So blessed to celebrate with true family this year, the ones who matter most. Little hearts bob in the comments. Someone writes, "Can't wait to see the perfect table." The irony is so loud I almost laugh. I lock my phone and stare at the harbor until the white triangles blur. The door alarm chimes. Alan, the caretaker, steps into the foyer when I buzz him in, bringing the dry smell of cold air with him. "Ms. Vale." He takes in my face and doesn't ask. "I got your message. I'll drive up ahead of you, check the grounds, stock the backup supplies. They're saying we might get hit." How bad? Enough to plan for. Alan doesn't dramatize. He prepares. It's why I trust him. "We'll lay fires in the hearths and stash candles in the sideboard," he says. "Generator's been tested twice this month, but I'll run it again." "Thank you," I say, and mean it. "We'll have about 32. One of his eyebrows tilts like a tent pole catching wind. "Then we'll make room for 32. He hesitates at the door. If it helps, I've always thought the measure of a house is how many people it can keep warm in a storm. After he goes, the condo feels too large for one person's breath. I throw clothes into a weekender and then add the framed recipe card written in Grandma's looping script, cranberry chutney, with a note about more orange zest than you think. Before I leave, I press play on my father's voicemail. Lyora. His voice comes through smooth as polished wood. It would have been simple to discuss any alternatives with us rather than escalate. Appearances matter in our community, and you know how people can be. Let's keep this reasonable. He pauses, lets the implication hang. Call me. I delete it without saving, then catch myself, restore it, and file it under evidence. Not to use, to remember. On the drive north, the city slouches behind me, and the trees gather into dark corridors. I watch the sky harden from lacquered blue to pewter and feel the storm lean its shoulder into the day. My phone buzzes with Derek's updates and little pockets of family enthusiasm, and one text from an unknown number that only says, "We'll handle this another way." A phrase that bangs against a memory I can't place. The road unwinds. My shoulders lower. For the first time since that soft, merciless ping, I feel something like relief. They cut me from their table, and I'm not begging to be reseated. I'm building a different room. At the last turn before the estate, a hawk lifts from a fence post and wheels over the field, effortless, as if the wind had been waiting. I follow the curve of the drive until the house appears. Brick and white columns and wide panes of glass, reflecting a sky about to break open. I park, step into the cold, and taste iron on the air. Inside, the echo of my footsteps is the first invitation. "We're doing this," I tell the empty hall, and my voice sounds steady enough to follow. The power hums low and reassuring. Somewhere in the kitchen, a compressor kicks on. I unlock the butler's pantry, pull out the linen sets, and line them up by size. Candles, matches, batteries. Place cards still blank, 22 of 32. I take out a pen and write the first 3 names I know by heart. Grandma Margaret, Derek, Emma. It feels like laying down rails ahead of a train I've decided to drive. Behind the glass, dusk tightens. The first flakes lift and float, then commit. I lean a place card against each plate I set on the long dining table and let the corners align perfectly. A small, stubborn order in a world that prefers me misaligned. I'm not going to their table anymore. I'm not knocking on doors that open to the same small room. Let them keep their curated guest list and their perfect image. I'm building a table where belonging isn't an audition. The snow thickens. My phone buzzes once in my pocket, an alert I don't read yet. I pick up the pen and keep writing names until the table looks like a promise I intend to keep. The New Hampshire estate creaked in the cold the next morning, like it was adjusting its old bones for what was coming. I padded across polished hardwood, every footstep echoing louder than I expected. The house had always been an investment, a line on a portfolio, not a living thing. Now it was waking. I brewed coffee in the cavernous kitchen, its stone counters chilled, cabinets yawning empty. Steam curled in the weak light, while outside, the maples stood like sentinels against a flat gray sky. I should have gone straight into town for supplies. Instead, some part of me tugged toward the storage unit off Route 3, where I'd stacked a decade's worth of life I didn't know what to do with. The fluorescent light flickered twice before holding steady, painting everything in the harsh honesty of a hospital corridor. Boxes lined up like obedient soldiers, each labeled in my handwriting: high school, college, family photos. I peeled back a flap. Dust breathed up, dry and acrid. The first photo album slid into my hands, its leather cracked, binding loose. Inside, there it was again. The pattern. Melissa centered, glowing, my parents' bodies angled toward her like she generated gravity. I hovered at the edge of each frame, cropped or shadowed. "You moved right when I clicked," Mom had explained once. After a while, I stopped pointing it out. A Christmas series from '95. Melissa tearing into an extravagant art set she'd circled in a glossy catalog. 2 pages later, me holding a practical winter coat, my smile brittle as ice. I remembered wanting a telescope so badly I'd dream about scanning constellations, mapping the sky for something bigger. I remembered pretending the disappointment didn't pierce. The next layer was paperwork, brittle and yellowing. My MIT acceptance letter, the emblem shining faintly even under the fluorescent buzz. I remembered running to the kitchen, interrupting Dad's coffee. "I got in," I'd said, so certain he'd be proud. He barely looked up. Computer science? For a girl? Mom had added softly, "We just worry about you, honey." Melissa's teaching degree, she said, would always be practical. The letter still carried the faint wrinkles of where I'd crushed it in my hands, smoothed it out, then tucked it into a pocket before walking alone to the park. I could still feel the cold bench under me as I cried where no one could see. Next came the pay stubs from 3 jobs I worked through college: cafeteria mornings, library afternoons, coding freelance in the dead hours. I remembered my body running on caffeine and desperation, refusing to take the semester off Mom recommended when scholarships fell short. "Borrowing money is irresponsible," she'd said. 6 months later, Dad casually mentioned a refinanced mortgage to pay for Melissa's dream wedding. Worth every penny. My fingers froze when I hit a wrinkled bank envelope. Inside, a denial letter for a sophomore year loan request. In the corner, written in my mother's looping script, were the words, "We'll handle this another way." My pulse jumped. What other way? Beneath it, clipped papers, a refinance document, Melissa's name bold, and a second page where my initials appeared faintly next to the phrase income verification. I'd given them pay stubs for FAFSA forms that year. I had no memory of agreeing to this. The fluorescent light buzzed harder, like it knew. I dropped onto the concrete floor, legs folded under me like a child, the papers spread out like puzzle pieces. Had they used me? Or was I reading too much into a clerical quirk? My gut said otherwise. A tiny piece of metal in my chest clicked into place, the feeling of recognition when the shadows you've always sensed finally reveal their shape. The phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Grandma Margaret. "I just heard," she said, fury in her voice that startled me. "They told me it's small this year. What they meant was, we only want Melissa's perfect picture." "It's fine," I said automatically. Decades of reflex. "It is not fine," she snapped, sharper than I'd ever heard her. "They've done this your whole life. I should have said something years ago." Her voice pressed against my chest like weight. Validation. The kind you don't know you've needed until it arrives too late. "I'm hosting instead," I said, surprising myself with how steady it came out. "At the New Hampshire place?" "Yes." "Good," she said, her tone softening. "I'll be there, sweetheart, and I'll make sure everyone knows who saved Thanksgiving." After we hung up, I carefully packed the memories back into their box, sealing them not to forget, but to remember. The unit closed with a metallic clank, the sound reverberating like a gavel in an empty courtroom. Driving back to the estate, the sky was darker, clouds rolling low like bruises. My phone buzzed again. Derek, his texts arriving in bursts. "Rachel's family is in. Uncle Robert, too. Then, also hearing your parents are making calls, saying you're embarrassing them." I pulled into the long drive, headlights slicing through bare branches, and felt the estate's silhouette rise against the horizon. It looked imposing, cold, as though daring me to make it into a home. Inside, I laid the papers on the grand dining table, their edges sharp under my hands. A notification banner slid across my phone before the screen dimmed. Mortgage file. Signature? I stared at it, heartbeat pounding. Another thread in a web I hadn't known I was caught in. The house groaned against the wind. I whispered to the empty dining room. I'm not imagining this. The papers lay like testimony before me. My table would hold more than food. It would hold the truth. By dawn, the estate was stirring with the kind of silence that comes before motion, the hush of a stage about to flood with actors. I walked barefoot across the great hall, the marble floor cold enough to bite. Outside, the maples stood stripped and bare, their branches rigid under the sky's deepening pewter. Snow had dusted the hedges overnight, just enough to sketch outlines in white. I paused at the front windows, watching my own reflection superimpose against the long driveway. Soon it wouldn't be just me here. Soon the house would hold voices. I carried the box of linens into the dining room. 15-foot ceilings arched above me, chandeliers waiting to catch fire from 100 bulbs, though their glitter couldn't compete with the wall of windows opening onto the pond. I smoothed cotton napkins until the folds were crisp, set crystal glasses where the light could fracture through them. Each place card was still blank, waiting for ink to claim its seat. 32 chairs circled the table, a kingdom of names not yet summoned. Alan appeared in the doorway, dusting snow from his coat sleeves. Generators primed, woods stacked. If the forecast holds, we'll be buried in white by Thursday. Good, I said, though my stomach fluttered. Then it'll be a real Thanksgiving. He studied me, eyes narrowed like he wanted to say something else. Finally, he just nodded. I'll start on the guest rooms. While he worked, I moved from room to room with deliberate intent. The east bedroom, lavender sachet tucked by the pillow for Grandma Margaret. The west suite, matching quilts folded for Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah. For the children, I built baskets filled with books and toys. I pictured Emma's wide eyes when she saw the unicorn plush waiting on her bed. Each detail was my small rebellion against years of being overlooked. Here, no one would feel like an afterthought. By noon, headlights wound up the drive. The first to arrive, Rachel and Tom, their sedan trailing the tracks of tires through slush. The car door opened and 3 children spilled out, boots crunching, voices carrying. 7-year-old Emma ran straight to me. Is this a castle? Her cheeks flushed pink from cold. I crouched so we were eye level. Not a castle, just a very big house. She grinned, tugging my sleeve. Bigger than Aunt Melissa's? Tom cleared his throat sharply, embarrassed. But I only smiled. Big enough for everyone. Rachel hugged me longer than usual. Her coat smelled of peppermint and faint smoke. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. Actually, I said softly, I did. More cars followed. Uncle Robert, face ruddy from the wind. Aunt Sarah with her tin of homemade cookies, balanced like an offering. Derek strode in with his teenage sons, hauling coolers and laughing too loudly, like he was trying to cover the nerves we all carried. Each arrival stitched another seam into the fabric of the house, transforming it from shell to shelter. In the kitchen, Chef Martin commanded a small army of assistants, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. Aromas of sage, garlic, and butter tangled in the air. He greeted me with a respectful nod. I've sketched a menu, your family's staples elevated, but nothing unrecognizable. Good, I said. I want it to feel like memory, but better. He smiled faintly. Food is memory. Food is how we tell people they belong. His hands moved quickly, chopping, seasoning. And sometimes it's how we tell them they've been forgotten. The words struck too close. I left him to his work and stepped into the hallway, where Derek caught me by the arm. Just so you know, he said low, your parents are still calling around, trying to convince people you're doing this just to show off. Is it working? He shook his head. The opposite. Everyone's furious. Grandma told Aunt Linda to pound sand. Her words. His grin broke through the tension. I've never loved her more. A laugh bubbled up in me, surprising in its warmth. For once I wasn't alone in the pattern. We all saw it. Later, I retreated to the study, where snow pressed against the windows in fat, slow flakes. I opened my phone, against better judgment. Melissa's post gleamed at the top of my feed. So blessed to celebrate with true family this year. The ones who matter most. Real Thanksgiving, family first. A chorus of heart emojis followed. The words felt like a blade sheathed in sugar. I dropped the phone onto the desk, staring at the mahogany grain until it blurred. Then I uncapped a pen and began writing names on place cards, each stroke of ink steady and deliberate. Grandma Margaret, Derek, Rachel, Emma. One by one, the table filled. Alan passed by the doorway. Storm's building. Candles are laid out in every room, just in case. Thank you. He hesitated. This isn't just a house anymore, he said. You're turning it into something. Don't forget that. When he left, I sat alone in the study, listening to the house breathe. The storm was coming. My parents' voices lingered in phantom echoes, their warnings about appearances, their insistence on Melissa's perfection. For years, I had been the shadow on the edge of their photographs. Now I was building a picture so large they couldn't crop me out. But in the pit of my stomach, another thought churned, the papers I'd found in the storage unit, my initials, written where they didn't belong. A mother's note promising, we'll handle this another way. And that unread notification about a mortgage file. I stared at the blank cards left on the table. 32 names to write, 32 seats to fill. Some would sit at this table laughing, eating, warm. Others, my parents, Melissa, would be absent, their curated celebration brittle and small. The wind pressed harder against the glass, rattling it in its frame. I dipped the pen again, steadying my hand. Whatever storm was coming, outside or in the family, I intended to meet it head on. By Thursday morning, the world outside the estate was unrecognizable. Snow fell in sheets, wind lashing it sideways, so that the driveway vanished under white. The maples bent low, their bare arms groaning. Inside, though, the house hummed with heat and anticipation. Voices bounced off the high ceilings, children squealing as they slid across polished floors in socks, Derek barking instructions to his teenage sons hauling firewood, Aunt Sarah fussing over her cookie tins as though they were crown jewels. Chef Martin's kitchen was an orchestra pit. Pans hissed, knives clattered, and through it all his voice guided with calm precision. Baste now. 2 more sprigs of rosemary. Yes, perfect. The air smelled of sage, butter, and slow roasting turkey. He caught me watching and lifted a ladle like a conductor's baton. Timing is everything, he said. Dinner in a storm tastes different. It reminds people of survival. By mid-afternoon, the storm was at full force. The windows rattled, the pond vanished behind a curtain of white. Alan moved through the house with quiet vigilance, checking candles, laying extra blankets at the foot of beds, making sure the generator was ready. "She's a bad one," he muttered near the dining room, "but we'll hold." Guests clustered in groups, filling rooms with life the house had never known. Emma tugged at my sleeve, eyes wide as she watched the snow swirl outside. "It looks like the world disappeared," she whispered. I knelt beside her. "It didn't disappear. It's just hiding. Sometimes you have to wait for the storm to pass to see it again." Her small hand slipped into mine, trusting. By 5 o'clock, the long dining table glowed with candles and crystal. 32 seats filled, each card handwritten in my careful script. No one left at the margins. The chandeliers glittered, though the storm made the light shiver. Uncle Robert rose, glass raised, ready to toast. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then darkness swallowed the room. A murmur rippled through the table. Children froze. Adults exchanged uneasy glances. From somewhere down the hall, Alan's voice rang out, steady. "Generator will kick in." But seconds stretched, then minutes, with nothing but storm howling against the windows. Instead of panic, something unexpected bloomed. A single voice began to hum. Amazing Grace. Grandma Margaret, her soprano tremulous, but unafraid. One by one, others joined. Soon the room was a swell of voices, cell phone flashlights flicking on, casting soft halos over faces. Derek's sons distributed candles from the sideboard, their flames dancing golden across crystal and china. I sat very still, watching it unfold. 32 people, faces alight in flicker and song, bound not by perfect lighting or curated photos, but by something raw and real. I thought of every holiday where I'd been cropped from the picture. Tonight, in this darkness, no one was invisible. Chef Martin appeared at my elbow, balancing a platter of roasted vegetables lit only by candlelight. "Improvisation," he whispered, "the essence of survival." His grin flashed white in the dim. As the hymn swelled, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. For years, I'd longed for recognition at my parents' table, but here, in the dark, I had something truer. Not perfection. Connection. Then, as I leaned to adjust a candle, my phone buzzed. The screen glowed with a notification preview before the battery died. Mortgage file. Signature required. My breath caught. The words seared into my mind even as the light blinked out. Another reminder of what I'd found in the storage unit. Another thread to a web I wasn't ready to see fully. The song ended. Silence lingered for a heartbeat, rich and whole, before laughter rose and conversations resumed. Plates passed, glasses clinked, children giggled at their own shadows on the wall. The storm raged outside, but inside the house, there was only warmth. 20 minutes later, with a low, reluctant groan, the generator sputtered to life. Lights flared back, flooding the room with brightness. For a strange second, I almost wished it hadn't. In the candlelit dark, I'd seen something purer than any glow could replicate. Alan slipped into the room, face tight. "Power lines are down across the county. Reports say your parents' neighborhood is out at least 8 hours. Are they all right?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "They've got a generator," Alan said. "Just the 7 of them in that big house, while we've got 32 warm and fed." His eyes flicked across the room, then back to me. Maybe there's more than one kind of wealth. I looked around at my table, at cousins leaning in close, children trading giggles, Grandma Margaret's face soft with light. For once, I wasn't the shadow. I was the host, the center, the one who had built something they couldn't diminish. Still, the echo of that preview haunted me. Signature required. My initials where they shouldn't have been. Mom's handwriting promising, "We'll handle this another way." The storm battered the house, but inside I understood. Some storms you welcome because they show you who gathers close. And some storms, quiet, invisible, have been brewing for years, waiting to break. Morning came soft and pale. The storm's rage replaced by a silence so complete it felt reverent. Snowdrifts rose like walls outside the windows. The driveway vanished into white. Sunlight fractured across the blanket of snow, so bright it hurt to look at. Inside, the house was a hum of slow movement. Children padding in slippers, adults cradling mugs, the smell of coffee and cinnamon weaving through the halls. I moved carefully through the great room, tray in hand, pouring coffee for Grandma Margaret, where she sat wrapped in a quilt. She touched my wrist as I handed her the mug. "Sweetheart," she said, her eyes twinkling, "you saved Thanksgiving." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed against the table. Notifications stacked so fast the screen blurred. Cousin Tyler had posted photos, candles glowing, plates gleaming, children's faces lit with joy. He'd captioned it, "Best Thanksgiving ever at Aunt Leora's." Dozens of comments followed. "Magical. This is what family should be." Another ping. Cousin Derek had uploaded a video of everyone singing by candlelight, voices rising as snow whipped outside the windows. Anna Lane had posted a photo of the dessert table, Chef Martin's cranberry tart glowing like a jewel. Then a tag notification stopped me cold. Tyler, in his enthusiasm, had tagged my parents in one of his posts. Suddenly, their curated silence was pierced. Comments began to bloom. "Wait, weren't you hosting? Why weren't you there?" Neighbors chimed in. Church friends asked pointed questions. By noon, the split-screen images started appearing. Someone had posted a photo of my parents' table, 7 people, polite smiles, space yawning between them, and placed it beside Tyler's shot of my 32, pressed close, laughter spilling over. The contrast was stark. One table hollow, the other alive. Rachel came into the room, phone in hand. "It's going viral," she whispered, equal parts awed and horrified. Grandma Margaret chuckled into her coffee. "Good. Let people see the truth." Still, I felt a twinge of unease. I scrolled past the gushing comments, pausing on one that sliced. Why weren't Brianna's parents there? The question dangled in the digital air, unanswered, damning in its simplicity. My phone rang. "Mother." I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, then again. On the 4th try, I answered. "How could you do this to us?" Her voice quivered with anger, not pain. "Throw some extravagant party just to humiliate your father and me?" "I didn't humiliate anyone," I said evenly. "I set a table because you told me I wasn't welcome at yours." "That's not—" She cut herself off. I heard Dad's voice rumble in the background. "Put him on speaker," I said. There was fumbling. Then his controlled baritone filled the line. "Leora, this has gotten out of hand. We need to discuss this privately. Appearances matter. You've made a spectacle." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Do you remember Melissa's birthday dinner 2 months ago?" Silence. I mentioned I'd sold Cybercore. I could hear him trying to recall, flipping through his mental Rolodex. "I sold it for $420 million, I said quietly. "I told you." No one listened. There was a sharp inhale, a stammer. For once my father, the man who always had a polished answer, had none. "I know," I added. "You never have." I ended the call before they could recover. My hands shook, but not from fear, from release. A shadow filled the doorway. Derek, holding a fresh pot of coffee. "Everything okay?" I met his eyes, better than it's ever been. But later, alone in my study, the unease crept back. I unlocked my phone, scrolling to the unread notification that had haunted me since the blackout. Mortgage file. Signature required. The timestamp was the same week Melissa's wedding had been paid for with a refinance. My initials. My mother's note. "We'll handle this another way." I sat in the quiet, the storm outside finally stilled, and realized with a chill certainty, last night wasn't the only reckoning. There was another storm, older, buried in papers, and signatures waiting to be named. 3 days later, the estate had gone still again. The last guests departed with hugs and promises. The laughter faded down the long drive. I returned to Boston, the harbor's winter light cutting hard against my windows. Boxes from the storage unit sat stacked in my condo's living room like silent witnesses. I'd meant to unpack them later. Instead, I left them where they could stare back at me. The buzzer rang just after noon. When I opened the door, my parents stood on the threshold. My mother clutched a worn leather photo album to her chest like a shield. My father's expression was bright, rehearsed, his client face. "We were in the neighborhood," he said, too casually. I let them in. They moved through the condo like tourists, eyes wide at the Rothko on the wall, fingers brushing the marble counter. "Quite a place you've built," Dad said, fishing. "Would you like to sit?" I gestured to the white sofa. They perched stiffly, the album balanced on Mom's lap. She opened it on the coffee table, flipping to a birthday photo. Melissa, center frame, candles blazing, my cropped shoulder barely in view. "Remember this? You were turning 8, she said with a brittle smile. "Yes," I said. "That was the year you forgot my birthday 3 months later. Grandma baked cupcakes instead." Her smile faltered. "That's not—" "It is." I crossed to the storage boxes, slid one open, and pulled out a journal. I wrote it down. I set the journal beside the album, then layered more items like exhibits. My MIT acceptance letter, still creased. Pay stubs from 3 jobs. The loan denial with Mom's handwriting. "We'll handle this another way." Dad leaned forward, forehead creased. "What's all this?" "Documentation," I said. "Proof I wasn't imagining things." His mouth tightened. "The past is the past. We should start fresh." Mom reached for my hand, her touch tentative. "We're family, Leora." I didn't extend mine. "Family doesn't use my income information to secure a refinance without telling me." Her head snapped up. "What?" I slid a photocopy across the table. My initials, faint but there, next to the line marked income verification. "I gave you pay stubs for FAFSA forms," I said quietly. "Not for this." Mom's eyes widened. "I never saw that." Dad's voice dropped, steady but defensive. "It was a rough year. Business was tight. I did what I had to do." "For Melissa's wedding," I said flatly. "For the family," he countered, but the crack in his tone betrayed him. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed on the table. Melissa's name. I answered and put it on speaker without warning. "Oh, they're there," she asked, startled. "They brought photo albums," I said evenly. Silence stretched, then her voice wavered. "Leora, I need to say this. I've always been jealous. You're smarter, braver. Being the perfect daughter was just how I hid my fear of losing." Mom gasped. "Melissa?" "No," she said firmly. "You pitted us against each other. I got attention for compliance. Leora got punished for excellence." The buzzer rang again. I opened the door to find Grandma Margaret, cheeks pink from the cold, her gaze unflinching. "I followed them," she said, stepping inside. Her eyes landed on the spread of papers across my table. "Good. It's time this came out." Mom bristled. "Mother, this isn't your concern." "It's exactly my concern," Grandma snapped. "I set up education funds for both girls. You drained Leora's to cover your shortfall. You never told me." Dad stood abruptly. "We did what we had to do." "No," 3 voices answered at once. Mine, Melissa's tinny voice over the phone, and Grandma's steady insistence. For the first time, my mother's composure cracked. Her shoulders sagged. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not the manipulative kind I'd seen before, but real. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't see." The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Grandma's voice was the one to break it, low, deliberate. It wasn't just the refinance. Every head turned toward her. The weight in her words promised more, a deeper betrayal buried under years of silence. Grandma lowered herself into a chair, her hands trembling as she set her purse down. The room was silent except for the muffled hum of the harbor outside. My father stood rigid by the window, arms crossed, like he could barricade himself against what was coming. My mother sat pale, eyes swollen. The photo album still open on the coffee table, as if it could anchor her. "It wasn't just the refinance," Grandma repeated, her voice steadier now. "When you were children, I set aside education funds for both of you. Small accounts, but enough to give you a start." She turned her gaze to me. "Yours was quietly redirected. They never told you." The words hung there, slicing the air. My stomach dropped. "Redirected? To where?" Dad's jaw clenched. It wasn't theft. It was a short-term loan. We had obligations. Obligations? My voice shook, incredulous. You drained my college fund to pay for Melissa's wedding and called it a loan? Mom flinched, tears rolling freely now. I thought it was timing. Your father said it was only temporary, that we'd replace it. You never did, Grandma said sharply. Don't lie to yourselves. You took from one daughter to give to the other. Melissa's voice crackled through the speaker. Is that true? You used Leora's money for me? Neither parent answered. The silence was confirmation enough. I stared at the papers on the table, the denial letters, the faint initials scrawled where they shouldn't have been. Suddenly, the years of exhaustion, working 3 jobs, begging for loans, living on caffeine and stubbornness, clicked into place. I hadn't failed to secure support. It had been stolen from me before I ever had a chance. I nearly broke myself trying to stay in school, I whispered. And you were sitting on money that was mine? Dad finally turned from the window, his face drawn tight. I was trying to protect the family. My business partner left me with debt. I had to juggle accounts, keep up appearances. People were watching. We couldn't look like we were failing. Protect the family? My laugh came out sharp, bitter. You protected Melissa's wedding photos and your reputation. You sacrificed me. Mom's voice cracked. We thought Melissa needed more support. She wasn't as strong as you. That broke something inside me. So my punishment for being strong was abandonment? On the phone, Melissa's voice was shaking. I didn't know. Dad told me it was just refinancing. I never asked whose money. I should have asked. Grandma leaned forward, her hands firm on her knees. This wasn't strength versus weakness. This was favoritism dressed as survival, and it cost Leora her youth. The room pulsed with silence again. Dad looked away first. I breathed hard, fighting the wave of fury that threatened to pull me under. Do you know what this means legally? Using my information without consent? Diverting funds meant for me? That's fraud. Mom's head jerked up, panic flashing. You wouldn't... I could, I said evenly, but I won't. Not if there's honesty, here and now. What do you want? Dad asked, his voice flat. First, I said, my tone measured, you admit what you did. To me. To Melissa. To Grandma. No more excuses about appearances. Second, you repay what you took, not to me, but into an education pool for the younger cousins. Let the next generation get what I was denied. Third, you stop pretending this family is perfect. You tell the truth, even when it burns. Dad's mouth pressed into a hard line. You're asking us to shame ourselves publicly. I'm asking you to stop hiding behind shame, I corrected. Grandma nodded fiercely. It's the only way forward. Melissa's voice softened over the phone. She's right. This family's rotted under secrets. If we don't stop it now, it'll keep eating us. For the first time in my life, I saw my father falter, not out of anger, but out of weariness. He sank into the chair opposite me, the weight of decades settling on his shoulders. I did it, he said hoarsely. I used your fund. I used your income records. I told myself I'd fix it later. I never did. Mom closed her eyes, tears sliding unchecked. I let him. I believed him. I didn't look too closely because I wanted Melissa to have everything I never had, and I told myself you'd survive without it. You were wrong, I said, my voice breaking, though I kept it steady. I survived, but it nearly destroyed me. The admission was raw, clumsy, incomplete, but it was the first crack in the wall. Grandma exhaled, leaning back. Then let this be the beginning of repair. I stared at them, at the parents I had longed for and long since stopped expecting. For the first time, they looked small, like people stripped of their armor. I'm not giving you another chance to pretend, I said finally. This is your choice. You own what you did, or you lose me for good. The storm outside had passed, but inside, another storm had finally broken open. December draped the estate in white silence. The snow along the driveway was carved into neat walls where Alan had plowed, and icicles hung from the eaves like glass daggers, catching the winter light. Inside, the halls smelled of pine and cinnamon. Christmas had always been a season I endured, but this year it was different. This year the house would not be empty. Through the bay window, I watched 2 cars wind up the drive. My parents stepped out of one, their movements tentative, guarded. Melissa's family tumbled from the other, Tom wrangling coats, the children's shouts carrying in the cold air. My chest tightened as the doorbell rang. I opened it myself. My mother stood clutching a foil-covered dish. Sweet potato casserole, she said softly, as if the offering itself might bridge decades. I stepped back. Welcome. The children rushed past, squealing at the towering tree in the great room, its light scattering color across their faces. Melissa followed, her eyes wary, searching mine for a signal. In the kitchen, Mom placed her dish on the counter and, without prompting, rolled up her sleeves to help arrange platters. For once, she didn't direct, didn't correct. She simply worked beside me. Your home is beautiful, she said, glancing around. I never understood what you built. I met her gaze. Thank you for coming. By evening, the long mahogany table stretched under chandeliers, every place setting gleaming, each name card laid carefully. There was no head seat, only a circle, everyone equal. Dad hesitated before sitting, scanning the room. Before we eat, he said, clearing his throat, I'd like to say something. To learning from our mistakes. Glasses lifted, voices murmured agreement. Mom's hand brushed my shoulder, tentative, almost fragile. And, she added, to our extraordinary daughter. The words landed uneven, imperfect, but real. After dinner, Melissa found me near the tree, its branches heavy with glass ornaments. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Thank you for giving the kids a whole family, for giving me a second chance to be your sister. Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time, I believed her. Later, while laughter rolled through the house and children dozed in corners, Grandma eased down beside me on the sofa. She slipped a sealed envelope into my hands. I did manage to save a piece of your fund, she murmured. Invested it quietly. It's grown. Not as much as what you've earned, but enough for something meaningful. Use it when you want to be generous, without asking permission from anyone. I held the envelope throat tight. You kept this for me all these years? She smiled, her eyes fierce. Because I knew one day you'd need to remember you always mattered. I looked around the room. Dad was laughing awkwardly at one of Derek's jokes. Mom poured coffee, her hands steady. Melissa knelt beside her children, guiding their small hands as they hung the last ornaments. And here, in this imperfect circle, something had shifted. I wasn't cropped out anymore. I wasn't begging for a seat at their table. I had built my own, and they had come to it on my terms. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who learn to see you. And sometimes it takes breaking the old table apart to make space for a new one. As snow whispered against the windows, I realized with a quiet certainty, next year, the table would be even larger, and every seat would matter.